2. And good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with the Captain. My name is Patrick Smith. I'm filling in for Jeff Crosby this morning, and I've got Captain Miles with me here and John Kellet from Clearwater Mills, the inventor of the trash wheel. Before we dive into Coffee with the Captain this morning, Captain Miles, do you have any updates from the ship for us?
Well, yes, also good morning. Yeah, Pride of Baltimore has already gone sailing a couple of weekends. We were in Annapolis 2 weekends ago. Last weekend, we did a splash arrival in Baltimore for kicking off the season and spent the afternoon at Broadway Pier and Fells Point. And it rained out and got windy, rained and windy on Sunday. So we came back here to our winter berth area over here in the eastern part of the north branch of the Patapsco, an area right next to Canton, Baltimore. And we've been doing maintenance. So we're replacing ratlins. There's a lot of splicing going on. And then, of course, resplicing because the measurement's just not right. And then there's some servicing of the service that goes around the standard rigging. Tarring and replacing of marlin, and then seizing on the ratlins. And it's quite a fiddly process. We probably have 6 members of the crew attacking that. We're looking forward, though, to going sailing next week, in the middle of the week, in honor of our guest, John Kellet, and his project that relates to the trash wheels that we've been talking about. And Patrick, you've been showing over the last year various iterations of a trash wheel, aka Pride of Baltimore is a trash wheel. So, John Kellet, welcome, and joining us with the Captain of the Pride of Baltimore.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's good to see you all. Excited to be here and excited about the upcoming week.
Yeah. So so on Wednesday next week, we're going to take the Pride of Baltimore out of mothballs and out of maintenance, and we're going to set sail again, and we're going to escort another trash wheel to Baltimore. What number does that make this for Baltimore?
Well, this will be Baltimore's 4th trash wheel, and it'll be the biggest trash wheel that Baltimore has. It's going in the Gwynns Falls River, which is the major tributary to the middle branch of the river. And anybody who's spent any time in the middle branch knows that there's a lot of trash in the middle branch. And so Gwynda will be working hard within the next month. And on Wednesday, if the weather cooperates, we're going to be pushing it from here in Bodkin Creek, right at the mouth of the Patapsco, and pushing it up into the harbor. And we're thrilled that Pride of Baltimore is going to be greeting us as greeting Gwynda as she takes her station in Baltimore Harbor to try to do something about the trash. So it's exciting time. It'll be a little while before it's actually installed, but we're going to make the move. It's a little tricky to get into the mouth of the Gwynns Falls. You got to have the right tide. You got to have a high tide because there's so many shallows up in there. So we're going to station it near the Hanover Street Bridge and wait for the tide. And when we get the right tide, we'll push it up in there, and then the piles will be driven and the booms will be attached, and we'll start collecting trash with Gwynda.
So Baltimore's inner harbor has gone from being commercial quite a long time ago to being more touristic and residential, recreational. And so there was an increasing sensitivity to the condition of the harbor in terms of its appearances. And so, and I think one of the things that I observed, along with everybody else, is that you go through these series of dry days and everything's looking pretty fine. And the city has its own trash sweeping system for the harbor, and it's a pretty effective one. But then you get these rainstorms coming across the area, and the next thing you knew, the harbor was just littered. And when you finally looked at the topography, you realize that there are these runoffs. These rivers used to be quite a bit more active long ago, but through silting and other things, they get dry quite often. The Jones Falls dries for a long time, and then it gets a gully washer, and then the next thing you know, all the trash sweeps down through the Jones Falls into the harbor. what is the genesis that you experienced that came up with the trash wheel idea?
Well, I started working in the traditional boat world, well, date me, way back in the early 90s. And I was working on the harbor, and like all of the folks who work on the harbor, I noticed that the trash was a tremendous impediment to the beauty of the harbor. It's, Baltimore Harbor is a beautiful harbor, as you well know. You sail in and out of it, and you see how beautiful it is, but it's hard to see that beauty when it's completely covered with trash. And working on the harbor, I would, notice that, just like you just said, after the rain is when we got all the trash in the harbor. And so the trash wasn't coming from people walking around the harbor throwing their coffee cup or whatever into the harbor. It's coming from the streets, the alleys, the parking lots, and all the land surface of the city. And when it rains, all that trash gets washed down into the storm drains, and then into the small creeks, and then into the bigger tributaries, and gets flushed out into the harbor. And as I crossed the mouth of the Jones Falls River every day, and particularly when it was raining, it occurred to me that we could take this sort of non-point source pollution and turn it into a point source pollution, because it all has to come past that 100-foot wide opening into the harbor. And it seemed to me that if we could stop it, collect it there, that we could make a big difference. And my first idea, having grown up on a farm, was to have like a floating hay baler that baled it. And I was like, you don't need to bale it, you just need to collect it. So, and it also occurred to me that the flow of the river that brings the trash is strongest when you have the most trash. So it's a power source there. And for centuries, Baltimore's industry was powered in large part by the flow of the Jones Falls and other rivers. There were mills, Clipper Mill and Meadow Mill, and all up and down the Jones Falls, that used the power of the river, the flow of the river, to power their industry. So it wasn't a new idea to use this power, but it was a new idea to use this power to tackle what was like you said, it was a growing problem, partly because plastics pollution is becoming more and more prevalent all the time. And secondly, because when the harbor shifted to a tourist and residential use more than the industrial use, trash is a lot more impactful when people are trying to recreate, when they're trying to enjoy the waterfront, when they're trying to live on the waterfront, than it is when you're just using it for industry. So that's where the idea of the trash wheel came from. And my first iteration was a quick sketch on a cocktail napkin at a Christmas party, and I started talking about the idea. And then I built a small working model, and I showed it to the city. And to the city's credit, they said, we like the idea, but it's an experiment. We don't have the mechanism to fund an experimental project like this. So I went to the Able Foundation, and the Able Foundation agreed to finance the prototype. And we put the prototype, the first water wheel powered trash interceptor, as it was called, and still technically called, but it's been, come to be known as trash wheels. That name sort of came about organically. And the prototype was very successful. People who worked on the harbor noticed it made a difference, and we picked up a heck of a lot of trash with it. But we learned a couple of things. One, we learned that the problem was a lot bigger than we had estimated in the estimates that we had been given, and that the job of picking up stuff from a flooded river was an incredibly challenging job. And the main thing we learned was that the concept was valid, but the implementation had to be bigger, stronger, faster. And fortunately, we had some champions in the harbor who had the vision to see that they could be a success and to invest in trying something new. And the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore took it upon themselves to raise funds for a permanent installation, or a long-term installation. We hope it's not permanent. We hope that trash eventually doesn't make it into the river in the beginning, but for the long term installation, and that's in 2014. We put in the first permanent trash wheel at the mouth of the Jones Falls, and it's taken on the name of Mr. Trash Wheel, and it's the grandfather of the trash wheel fleet.
So how far is this spread outside of Baltimore? You say this is number 4, so that's cool. You're based in this part of Maryland. I understand that you've got some stuff outside of Maryland.
Yeah, we're working on projects. We don't actually have any trash wheels in operation outside of Baltimore, but there will be in the near future. We're working with a great group in Panama City, Panama. They've put together one heck of a team down there to bring a trash wheel to a very polluted river in Panama City, and we've got the funding. We just got to get the permits and the approvals to move forward, which are forthcoming. It's been slowed down a little. We were hoping it would be in operation by now, but with the pandemic, the permitting office is closed for a while, and things sort of got slowed down. But we're hoping in the near future to be working there. We've got a project in Fort Worth, Texas, which is an ambitious project because, and I got to give Fort Worth a lot of credit because they're, unlike Baltimore, they're way inland. And the easiest solution to dealing with your waterborne trash is what we've done for years, which is just let it go downstream and become somebody else's problem.
Oh,
and that's, it's not a nice solution, but it sure is cheap and easy. And Fort Worth is, they've taken on the slogan, where the West begins and where trash ends. So they're gonna put on a trash wheel in the Trinity River there, and that's an exciting one. Newport Beach, California, is in design right now for a waterway called San Diego Creek. Southern California is interesting because they don't get, we get rain like every 4 or 5 days here on average. Southern California gets it like 12 days a year, 12 storms a year. So this trash wheel is going to be set up to, handle those flashy but very infrequent storms. So it's a little different application there, but it's same concept, same goal. Keep it out of the oceans, keep it out of the harbors, keep it out of the bays.
So you're creating a collecting process. What have you learned about the demands of this of taking that collected trash and moving it on? Where here in Baltimore, what goes after you've collected it? What happens to it?
Well, it goes to the waste to energy facility, the incinerator at Bresco. And actually, Gwynda is going to be right next to that facility. That's where the Gwynns Falls dumps into the harbor. So we're going to actually take that trash directly that we collect from the Gwynns Falls directly to the incinerator. It is a less than ideal situation because a lot of that stuff that we pick up in theory is recyclable. We do believe that in certain places we could segregate the recyclables from the rest of the material that's not recyclable and do something with it, which would be a lot better than just, all at once turning it into energy, burning it energy. We actually, BMW in Germany wanted to see if they could take our collected waste and turn it into car parts or lubricants or something for their BMWs. And we sent them 5 55-gallon drums of the trash that we collected. And and I guess they were less than excited. But I just pictured German scientists in white coats opening up these drums and going, "Holy crap! What did these Americans send us with this?" The stuff that we collect is nasty. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that it's not a fun job to segregate it, and a lot of the stuff is contaminated with sewage, with oils, with stuff like that. So it's not a great raw stock for recycling, at least in the Jones Falls. The professor is in Harris Creek, and because of the nature of the watershed, a lot of that material is a lot less. It's a smaller watershed, flashy. So the plastic and things that could be recyclable spend a lot less time in the, I think if you throw something in the Harris Creek watershed, throw it down on the ground, it can be a matter of hours before it gets to the trash wheel and gets scooped up. That trash has a more potential for being recycled, I think, than the stuff coming down the Jones Falls and the Jones Falls.
Right. Wow. So you have 4 of them that are in the Baltimore area, and they've got these unique names. I'm not familiar with all the unique names.
Yeah, so Mr. Trash Wheel was the first one. I didn't have much of a part in this, and we were focused. Our company is focused mostly on getting the trash out of the water, making the machine work, and the performance of it for collecting it. But fortunately, and I thought when we came up with it that the most rewarding thing that could come from it is seeing a lot less trash out in the harbor that we had to deal with. But the Waterfront Partnership took it a step further. They gave it a personality, a Twitter feed, a Facebook page, a whole social media presence with the personality of Mr. Trash Wheel. And it gained an internet following, a huge internet following all around the world. And they made a graphic with googly eyes on the front of Mr. Trash Wheel. And there was an online petition to make those googly eyes real in real life. So thousands of people signed this petition saying you need to put real googly eyes on a real machine. So now the machines all have googly eyes on them, and they all have their individual personalities. And so the first one was Mr. Trash Wheel. The second one is Professor Trash Wheel, and Professor is a female trash wheel. And she's got a different personality. She's a little more scientific in her voice. Mr. Trash Wheel is sort of a jokester and nerdy. Professor Trash Wheel is sort of more environmentally focused, and then Captain Trash Wheel, which is actually gender neutral, is at Masonville Cove. Captain Trash Wheel is owned by the Maryland Port Administration, and they took it upon themselves to fund and implement that project at Masonville Cove. And I don't know if most people in Baltimore, even in Baltimore, aren't really that familiar with Masonville Cove, but it's an amazing transformation that's occurred over there. If you went to Masonville Cove 20 years ago, you would have seen about the most disgusting piece of water that you could imagine. There were cars in the water, there were tires everywhere, there was just a dumping ground corner of the harbor. And as part of their dredge containment facility construction at Masonville Cove, they cleaned it up and turned it into an environmental area. And now you see bald eagles and you see tons of waterfowl over there. And it's kind of a great little section to visit if you haven't been there. And Captain Trash Wheel is kind of a centerpiece now of that area, and it's working hard keeping the trash that's flowing from the Curtis Bay area. There's a small stream that drains Curtis Bay, and that's kind of a dirty little section of town, so it gets a lot of trash coming out, and Captain Trash Wheel intercepts it before it ends up out in the harbor.
So let's go into the business of the what makes the trash wheel work. Are making that wheel go around. If there's are you all together dependent upon a current, or is there some other assist that goes along with it?
That's a good question. The trash wheel, the water wheel is the engine for the machine, but it gets its energy from 2 different sources. The flow of the river that brings the trash provides a lot of energy to turn that wheel. And the wheel, in turn, the rotation of the wheel provides the power for the rakes that push the trash up onto the conveyor, and for the conveyor that lifts the trash from the water and dumps it into a dumpster. There are a lot of times when that flow of the water, because we're in the tidal mouths of the tributaries where the flow is slowed down and the trash is still coming. So we supplement that flow by having solar panels on the machines. Those solar panels charge batteries. The batteries power pumps. The pumps pump water from the river up into the buckets of the wheel, and the weight of the water turns the wheel, and it supplements that flow. So we're always getting something from the flow. If the trash is coming downstream, then we have some current bringing it downstream. So we're always getting something from the flow, but a lot of the times it's not adequate to power the machine to pick up the trash. So we get and it's a good system because the, if you tried to just have a solar powered motor on the conveyor, it would have a hard life because sometimes you got 10 styrofoam cups on that conveyor. Other times you've got a 1,400-pound log on that conveyor, and that's, would bog down that motor. But the water wheel doesn't really care. It'll slow down, but it just fills more with water, and it acts as its own transmission, providing tremendous amounts of torque, which is really what you're after on that job, is torque, not after speed or after the torque. So
Is there a process for deciding when the water pumps are pumping, or is that just going on anyway?
well, we have, it's like it's a centuries old method of using the water wheel, but we do have some more high-tech pieces of it. We have an internet connection on board, but we have a microwave dish that receives an internet feed, and that allows us to look at cameras so we can see how full the dumpsters are. We can pull out our smartphones, we can look at each of the machines, see how full the dumpsters are, see if there's trash in front of it, see how it's running. And it also allows us to turn on those solar powered pumps. So part of our routine in the morning is to see if there's any trash in front of any of the machines. If there is, we click on the pumps. And sometimes we'll click on 2 pumps. Each machine has 8 or 10 pumps. The smaller ones have 8 pumps, the bigger ones have 10 pumps. And we can click on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10 of them. And if there's a lot of trash, we'll click it on full power with all 10 pumps pumping. If there's just a little bit, and sometimes we do what we call running it for show, or if it's a nice summer day, may not be any trash, we just turn it on because we got people looking at it, and then when it's active and turning, it's a lot more engaging. And engaging people and becoming part of the solution is part of what we want to achieve with the trash.
Yeah. Wow, that's it. And that business of the hydrological solution, yeah, that's forever old, and time is not an issue. As long as you got the energy to pump the water, the rate at which the conveyor belt would move is really dependent upon load that it's lifting. So that's an interesting thing to wrap my brain around. So the collectors of water, if the load is light on the conveyor, they don't get full. But as time goes by and the weight is greater, then it just slows down and they just get fuller and fuller and fuller, and it keeps on going. That's very cool. I'm really impressed, John.
Well, you ought to come on board and check it out in action, because it's a remarkably simple machine, but I do think there's some elegance in that simplicity. I also think that simplicity is part of what has engaged people. The trash wheel has a huge fan following now. And I think part of the reason is because people look at it and go, they understand it, and they even think, I could do something like that. And we have kids who are in robotics clubs and Lego leagues and things like that, who are working on their own trash wheel style solutions for plastic pollution. And I think that's maybe even more important than the measurement of tons that we collect, is having people understand the problem and inspiring them to become part of the solution, because trash wheels are not the ultimate solution to this. And as you know, there is no silver bullet for trash in the water, except preventing it from ever getting there in the first place. So, in a big heavy storm, the trash wheels can't collect everything that comes. When we had that storm that flooded Ellicott City, we're not really collecting trash. We're just in survivability mode. And it's, it does containment booms that funnel the trash to the to the machine. You know, they're just hanging on. They're not really guiding that trash when it's just crazy flood like that. But in normal conditions, the capture rate is pretty darn good. But that said, you know, we really, you know, it's not a silver bullet, like I was saying before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Miracle
yeah.
machine that's going to solve all the problems of trash in the harbor.
John, one of our guests is actually curious about the capture rate. Could you elaborate on, I guess, the efficiency of the trash wheels?
Well, the capture rate is very dependent. I mean, in most situations, if we have a normal rainstorm bringing lots of trash, our capture rate for floatables is well over 90%. Now you do have, you know, you can't stop the whole river and filter the whole river. So we're only collecting what's on the top 2 feet of the water column. And it's basically the floating trash and the neutrally buoyant stuff that's floating in the top of the water column. We don't really know what goes underneath it. You know, there's a lot of trash that's heavier than water. Aluminum cans full of water sink, as you know. You've probably seen them, you know, on the bottom in places where the water's clear. So they're probably getting passed on. I'm sure they're getting passed down underneath the trash wheel. But for floatables, in most conditions, we're well over 90%. And I think if you take the year as a whole, you know, we've averaged with Mr. Trash Wheel collecting about 250 tons of trash per year in the 7 years that he's been in. And I would say that, you know, that's at least 80% of what came down that river in that year on average.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, and yeah, that's another thing to appreciate as a citizen living in this ever more technical and modern world. As it's not just on the surface. It's what we're reacting to, but it's not just on the surface. Yeah. Wow. So
yeah, and trash is just one piece of the water quality problem as well. I mean, there's a lot of probably more significant water quality issues that the Chesapeake Bay has and the oceans have, you know, things like eutrophication and chemical pollution and things like that. So it's, you know, it's a piece of the puzzle, but it isn't the whole ball of wax.
right. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Just for the fun of our audience, what was the most humorous challenge you had to overcome, if there is one?
Well, that's a good question.
It's a tricky one. I didn't mean to surprise.
It's a tricky one. I'll have to think about that one, yeah. And I don't most humorous that the challenges may be humorous in hindsight.
Yeah, right.
When you're dealing with in real life, it's the humor is a little hard to see sometimes. But I mean, we've had a lot of sort of funny objects that have been collected by the trash wheel. We've had a guitar, we've had, you know, high heel shoes, we've had all kinds of kind of funny objects come up the conveyor. Conveyor really doesn't care. The machine really doesn't care what's coming up into the dumpster. You know, we had a dumpster in a dry period. We've taken out as many as 12 dumpsters in a single day after a storm, and these are big dumpsters. So, and they can hold as much as 5 tons of trash. But when it's dry, we've had these dry periods, and the same dumpster can sit in there for weeks at a time. We had a one dumpster that sat there for a while, and we finally went to take it away, and the goose had made its nest on top of the trash pile in the dumpster. and we pushed the dumpster to the Goose rode with us the whole way, pushing a dumpster from Jones Falls to the boat ramp at Canton Waterfront Park. And the dumpster driver did not want to take the goose eggs to the incinerator. So he collected the goose eggs and he incubated them and hatched his own little goslings with even our dumpster drivers are really invested in these and wanted to save the goose eggs.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
None of our crew wanted to take on the mother goose to get the eggs away from her, but he didn't.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's a wonderful anecdote. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, well, certainly the social media side of it, I was quite impressed with our Pat Smith's creative inventiveness with displaying Pride of Baltimore with paddle wheels off to the side with googly eyes that were inspired by the trash wheel. I don't keep up with some of those details. There must be some great fun imagery that's come out of the social media.
Yeah, they Waterfront Partnership does a really nice job with the social media, and they're always trying to connect it to timely things. You know, they have Bernie Sanders and inauguration sitting in front of the trash wheel or sitting on the trash wheel, and it's fun to connect it to other Baltimore icons like the Pride 2, and it's you know, when I see the Pride 2 with googly eyes on it and paddle wheels on it, I get excited that, you know, our trash wheel has sort of had an impact to be an icon like the Pride 2 is. So it's been an extremely rewarding project, especially
And you
here.
mentioned earlier in our conversation relative to the youth being stimulated by this sort of animation aspect of it. The partnership is probably doing most of that, connecting with younger folks with regards to the business of trash and living in a modern world.
Yeah, we do a little bit ourselves, and you know, we have youth groups who've come to see the trash wheels being constructed. We've had field trips that we are a part of that come down to see the trash wheels. We're part of the trash wheel birthday party where they make it, where kids from a local school made a trash cake to feed to Mr. Trash Wheel, and so we try to do it as much as possible as well. But the Waterfront Partnership does a really beautiful job using the trash wheels popularity to engage younger folks. And it's amazing too, you know, even older folks, it's amazing how many people don't realize that what they do on the land side, you know, if their trash is tipped over in their alley, that if they don't clean it up, it's going to end up in the harbor, in the bay, eventually out into the Atlantic Ocean, causing problems the whole way along that journey. And it's not just an aesthetic problem. It used to be thought trash used to be not even categorized as a pollutant because it was thought of as just an aesthetic problem. Well, now they're finding that the plastics that we use break down and become microplastics, enter the food chain, affect the coral reefs, affect the fish populations. Fish it's hard to find a fish nowadays that you can't find some amount of its biomass is actually made out of plastic, which is a little bit scary.
Yeah, I've been seeing those headlines and read some of those articles that have made that observation, found that discovery. Yeah. So, yeah, it's we live in our bubbles. Talk about bubbles. You know, it's the inherent human condition is we're the center of the universe, and we have met the enemy, and they are us.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, I think the real cause and the piece of the puzzle that needs to be addressed is that, you know, we use these plastic items for literally 5 minutes. So, you know, we drink a bottle of water and dispose of that bottle of water. Hopefully we dispose of it in a way that, you know, it's going to be back into the plastic chain, or at least not enter the environment. But, you know, it's a lot of massive stuff that's we're generating for very minuscule amount of time that we actually use it. And then it's going to cause problems for potentially hundreds of years. Plastics don't break down for hundreds of years to where they're, you know, they don't biodegrade. So they're gonna stay out there, and that's gonna be our legacy if we, you know, don't do something about it.
Right. Yeah. And I can remember sailing in the 70s, 60s and the 70s, particularly the 60s. I was doing in my high school years in the late 60s, I did a lot of yacht delivery work along the coast, and the trash issue offshore, making runs between the mouth of Chesapeake Bay or the mouth of the Delaware up to New England. It was surprising how much junk there was out on the Western Atlantic. And that became the conscientious cosmetic response. And of course, that's all changed. It's not so visible, but it's broken down. And that's been a real learning curve for everybody. So voting and controlling trash, we do much like the trash wheel. We save everything that is a plastic and that is not going to naturally break down, or on short trips, we just hang on to it anyway. And then we put it somewhere else. And that chain is invisible to us and goes way beyond. And as you pointed out, you know, you try to get it burnt over there in that facility for Baltimore's. But there's stuff that they can't burn. So where does that go? And that's the big challenge. Wow.
And, you know, when I started this, I thought Baltimore was particularly problematic. It was a dirty harbor and a terrible problem with trash. And then once the trash wheel went viral, I get calls to, you know, we need a trash wheel here in Rio de Janeiro. We need a trash wheel in Indonesia. We need a trash wheel in Panama City. And I go to these places, you know, lovely places, but I get to see the absolute worst side of them because I'm going to the filthy river to see where the trash is, where the trash problem is. And Baltimore's pristine in comparison to some of these places. I mean, Panama City, you walk down the beach, you're literally knee deep in plastic. It's unbelievable. And it's, you know, it's just not sustainable.
Right.
And Rio de Janeiro, in Rio de Janeiro, they have 20 million people. 12 million of those people have no trash collection, have no access to trash collection. And so what do? They take their trash, they either burn it somewhere or they dump it in a gully where the tropical rain will wash it down into the river and into the Guanabara Bay. And with 12 million people doing that, the bay is choked with plastic.
Wow. Those are incredible numbers. Wow.
Now, we actually had a question come in that was like, what kind of surveys do you guys do to determine like I guess the feasibility of a location for a trash wheel?
Well, that's a really good question. The obviously trash wheels can't go everywhere, and we've been to some places where trash wheels just don't make any sense. So we looked at a project down in Atlanta, Georgia, on a waterway called Peachtree Creek. The problem with Peachtree Creek is it's sort of carving a little canyon. And yeah, you could get a trash wheel down there, but you can't access it from anywhere, and you can't get the trash, you know, there's nowhere downstream to take the trash, and getting it up out of that canyon would be very, very difficult. But and then there's the challenges on a really big river like the Mississippi or even the Susquehanna of navigation and just the scaling it to that size. So in those situations, you want to go to the tributaries that flow into it and tackle the problem there. And sometimes that's doable and sometimes that's challenging. So what we do, begin with is when somebody calls us about, we want a trash wheel in our river, the first thing I do is go on the line, ask them where they want to put it, get a location, go on Google Earth, look at, the watershed area of that river, look at the physical parameters of that river. And we just do a sniff test to see, we're wasting our time or you're wasting your time thinking about a trash wheel for this location. Most of the time, it can be done. And then from there, we do an on-site visit, a site assessment where we actually go. I've done these in New York City, I've done them in Indonesia, we've done them in Hawaii, we've done them, the list goes on and on. We've done many, many of these site assessments. And most of the time, if we get to that point, it can be done. The budget may vary depending on how hard it is to access that area, and how big the waterway is, and how much we have to scale it to the waterway. And from there, then we would go into the design and permitting phase. And we've gotten a lot of those projects are now in that phase. It takes a lot of time though, because what we're up against is what I talked about before, is that the status quo that's been used for years and years and years is cheap, and which is let it go on downstream and become somebody else's problem. People, if they're going to make a trash wheel project, and Baltimore's done a fantastic job because they've taken on the ownership of the trash that comes down the river, and they've developed, Waterfront Partnership has developed a whole program to maintain and operate those trash wheels for the long haul, because that's what it takes. It's one thing, you can't just buy it and forget it and put it in the river. So some of these places learn that it's a daunting task, and that they're going to have to take their time to figure it out. And some of them realize that they may not be up to the job, but when they figure out they're going to own 250 tons of trash every year from now on.
Right, and the logistics aren't as they don't end with the installation of the trash wheel. As you pointed out, there's this process of accessing where the trash got dumped by the conveyor belt. So you talk about a dumpster, and I've seen this in Baltimore. That dumpster is on a barge and it's afloat, and so there's the process of going by water with a new dumpster, exchanging the dumpsters from full to empty, and then take the full one somewhere. And then there's the mechanical process of getting the dumpster that's full empty. That means you're fighting gravity. You got to go up, right? Because you're already at water level. So that canyon story that you talk about, there's no navigation for a boat and a barge to go up the gully. So that means if in a fantasy world, if they were going to put a trash wheel there, they'd have to create a great big conveyor belt back up to the top of the gorge, right?
Exactly that, or a crane to lift the dumpster out of that hole. It makes the trash wheel is basically a pretty simple operation in its kind of pure form, in its right application. But in a situation like that, it gets a lot more complex. And if you can't get a lot of these places we go to, I call them boat shy, because they're really reluctant to push a dumpster barge around with a boat. For us, it's second nature. I was a boat guy. You're a boat guy. It's no big deal. Pushing these dumpster barges to the boat ramp and hauling them out is really quite simple. But a lot of these municipalities, if they don't have boats already as part of their infrastructure, they're like, oh no, boats. Boats are tricky. Boats are expensive. Boats are scary. So, like in Fort Worth, we're going to create a ramp right behind the machine, so they literally don't have to get on a boat. They can just pull the dumpster float over to this ramp and take have the truck exchange it out for an empty right there. And that seems to help them get over. In Panama, it's the same thing. That's the same kind of plan we're operating in.
So as a detail here in Baltimore, those barges, after they're exchanged and they're full, how are they being emptied?
So what we do is, for the Professor and Mr. Trashwheel, we have 2 dumpster barges for each machine, and we have 3 dumpsters for each machine. So when the one's getting full out at the trash wheel, we take another barge with an empty on it over there. We pull the full one out, slide the empty one in, push the full one to Canton Waterfront Park, near where your winter home is. And a truck meets us the truck brings an empty dumpster, sets it down, pulls the full one off, sets it down, puts the empty one back on the barge. It sounds complicated, but it really only takes, I timed it, it's 10 minutes at the boat ramp. If the crew knows what it's doing, if the driver's done it before, and if the you know, if it goes smoothly, which it almost always does. We've done hundreds of them now, so it's pretty much second nature. And the system works. It's really pretty simple. But we do, Mr. Trash Wheel by water is 2 to 3 miles from the ramp. So we got a fair amount of time. Those dumpsters don't push fast. And so you probably, I think last weekend our dumpster barge was in your way as you were coming in the harbor. You probably saw our guy with.
Well, actually in maritime talk, we were overtaking vessels. So we had no rights.
Well, we got a plastic bag in our prop right when you, it was one of our guys, Akeem, was driving the dumpster that day. Yeah. And he's not from Baltimore. And he calls me, he says, "There's a pirate ship right behind me." I was like, that's not a pirate ship. Well, sort of a pirate ship. And so I gave him a little Baltimore history lesson, and he's fascinated by it. And so now he knows all about Pride too. And he's excited. He'll be on board when you greet us on Wednesday. So he'll be excited to see you again, now knowing what Pride 2 represents and the history and all that stuff behind it.
Yeah. So, well, that's great, John. So come this next Wednesday, you'll be moving from way down near the mouth of the Patapsco River, the length of the Patapsco River, pretty much. And you're looking to, you think, if everything falls the way it looks the weather could be, you'll be passing through the Key Bridge around 9 and then near the fort around 11.
Yeah, that's the plan. We're hoping it's a bad sailing day for you guys, because if it's dead calm, that'll make our job a lot easier.
Right.
And the weather looks like it'll be light and variable for that day.
Yeah.
Because we push it with a pretty small boat. Actually, what we do is we put a little boat where the dumpster barge normally slides in the bay, and make it like a composite tug sort of set up, and we push it, but we're only able to make about 3.5 knots.
Right.
And I put it on the Navionics, and it looks like 5 hours and 10 minutes at that rate from where we're at.
What's the destination for the preparation that day? Where are you headed?
We're going to dock at the marina at Nick's Fish House by the Hanover Street Bridge.
Okay.
And I think if the weather's nice, we might do a little quick detour in towards Canton Waterfront Park and go along Fort McHenry's shoreline, so folks can see us and see Pride, and then go tire up to the dock at Nick's Fish House.
Right.
And from there, we'll just be watching the tides and hoping for a good spring tide to get us in across those mud flats.
Yeah, right. John, thank you for taking the time. For me, this has been a wake-up call to all the adventures and challenges that you've been overcoming and creating, and it's fascinating how it's caught on. It's a wonderful grass organic idea that in its organicness, it's just so straightforward. So no wonder it's popular, but it's a great story. Thank you for joining me.
No, it was my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday, and thanks a lot for being part of it.
Yeah,
it's going to make it special for us, and we'll be glad to see you out there.
sure, sure.
I was out fishing on last Saturday and saw you making your way back up the bay from, I guess you were in Annapolis, and
Yeah, yeah. So, but the legacy of Pride of Baltimore is celebrating Baltimore and Maryland over the last more than 4 decades and counting. So the worldwide renowned nature of that story, and it brings a lot of focus to Maryland, a lot of focus from the outside to Baltimore. So I think you guys are qualifying as a Pride of Baltimore too. It's bringing focus to an area that is being seen from the outside. I mean, you're getting calls from around the world. How cool is that? I don't think we're getting calls from around the world, although our photograph gets shown around.
well, if we can even approach or even scratch what you guys have achieved over the last 20 or 30 years, we'd be very proud that we've had an impact. You guys, I've sailed on traditional vessels for my early career, and I was Lady Maryland crew, and then I helped build Sigsbee, and I come from that family, and I almost feel like I was part of the Pride family, because so many of my friends, actual family members, were crew members on board, and so I've been a follower and a fan of Pride for the longest time. So this is
your napkin drawing has turned into a worldwide interest. So yeah, you're bringing a lot of attention to Baltimore and Maryland in the process of that napkin growing from that situation to what it is now and growing. That's cool. John, we'll see you out there on Wednesday. So thank you very much. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. And the summer is coming.
Cap, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, as always, stay diligent, everyone.
Awesome. And we will be trying to live stream the parade of sorts that we're going to have with the Trashville. So be sure to tune in on Wednesday morning and see what we can come up with. But
Great.
Well, thanks so much, guys. This has been a lot.